I was working the checkout counter at a grocery store in Copenhagen when an American tourist approached me with a confused look on his face. He was holding a liter of milk and asked me why Europeans use such weird measurements. I told him it was a liter. He stared at me for a solid 5 seconds and said, "Yeah, but how much is that in normal measurements?" I had to explain that literally the entire world, except 3 countries, uses the metric system. He looked genuinely shocked and asked which 3 countries still use the old system. I said, the United States, Liberia, and Myanmar. He paused, looked at his milk carton and said, "Well, at least we're in good company." I didn't have the heart to tell him that even those other 2 countries were slowly switching over. My cousin works at a hotel in Amsterdam, and she told me about an American guest who complained that his room didn't have air conditioning. It was April and about 15 degrees Celsius outside. She explained that most European homes and hotels don't need AC because the climate is mild. He insisted it was freezing and demanded extra blankets. She brought him 3 extra blankets. 2 hours later, he called the front desk again, sweating, saying the room was now too hot. He had turned the heating up to maximum and piled all the blankets on himself. She had to explain that 15 Celsius is about 60 Fahrenheit, which is perfectly comfortable room temperature. He said nobody told him he'd need to do math on vacation. I used to work at a train station in Brussels selling tickets. An American woman came up to me and asked for a ticket to Paris. I told her the next train was at 1400 hours. She looked at me like I'd spoken another language. She said, "I don't do military time. Can you just tell me when the train leaves?" I said 2 p.m. She seemed annoyed that I didn't just say that in the first place. Then she asked why the train ticket cost so much. It was 45 euros for a high-speed train that would get her to Paris in under 2 hours. I explained that this was actually quite reasonable for the distance and speed. She told me that back home, she could drive that distance for the price of gas. I pulled up a map and showed her that Brussels to Paris is about 300 kilometers. She had assumed Europe was much smaller and that Paris was maybe an hour away by car. When I told her it would take over 3 hours to drive, she asked why anyone would take the train then. I explained that the train is faster, more comfortable, and you don't have to deal with traffic or parking. She bought the ticket but muttered something about how confusing Europe was. I document these cultural collision moments every single week. The patterns most people miss, the psychology behind why these interactions keep happening. If you think 3 steps deeper than the surface-level humor, you're exactly who this channel is built for. A friend of mine works at a restaurant in Rome, and he told me about an American couple who asked for the manager because their pizza was wrong. The manager came over, very concerned, asking what was wrong with it. They said it was too thin and didn't have enough toppings. They had ordered a margherita pizza. The manager explained that this is traditional Neapolitan-style pizza, thin crust with simple fresh ingredients. The husband said, "But where's the pepperoni? Where's the stuffed crust?" The manager, trying to be polite, explained that American pizza and Italian pizza are very different things. The wife then asked if they could just make it the normal way. My friend said the manager's face went through about 5 different emotions before he calmly explained that this was the normal way in Italy. They ate it anyway, but left a review saying the pizza was too Italian. I was studying abroad in Germany and worked part-time at a tourist information center in Munich. An American guy came in asking where he could find a good German restaurant that served burgers and fries. I suggested a traditional Bavarian restaurant instead and recommended schnitzel or sausages. He made a face and said he didn't eat weird food. I asked what he meant by weird. He said anything that isn't American food. I pointed out that he was in Germany and might want to try German food. He said he traveled to experience culture. not to eat strange things. I didn't know how to explain that food is a huge part of culture. He eventually asked if there was a McDonald's nearby. I gave him directions. He thanked me and said, "At least some things are the same everywhere." My sister worked at a museum in London and told me about an American school group that came through. One of the students asked why everything in the museum was so old. The teacher tried to explain that Britain has thousands of years of history. The student genuinely asked why they didn't just build new stuff instead of keeping all the old buildings. Another student asked why everyone in England spoke English with an accent. The teacher looked exhausted. She explained that British English came first and that technically Americans are the ones with the accent. The student argued that couldn't be true because Americans don't have accents. Everyone else does. My sister said the teacher just moved the group along to the next exhibit. And that moment, that's not just funny. It's a perfect case study in linguistic imperialism and unconscious bias. This is what I do here. Find the sociology hiding in the comedy. Most channels give you reactions. I give you frameworks. If you know the difference, you know what to do. I worked at a hostel in Barcelona for a summer, and we had an American guest who complained that nobody spoke English. I reminded him that he was in Spain, and the official language is Spanish. He said he thought everyone in Europe spoke English. I explained that while many people do speak some English, especially in tourist areas, you can't expect everyone to be fluent. He said that back in America, if you run a business, you speak English. I pointed out that in Spain, if you run a business, you speak Spanish. He didn't seem to understand the parallel. Later that day, he came back excited because he'd successfully ordered food in Spanish. He was very proud of himself for saying hola and pointing at pictures on a menu. Small steps, I guess. A colleague of mine worked at a pharmacy in Paris, and an American tourist came in asking for Tylenol. She explained that they don't sell Tylenol in France, but they have paracetamol, which is the same active ingredient. He insisted. He needed Tylenol specifically because that's what his doctor recommended. She showed him the paracetamol package and explained that it's literally the same medicine, just a different brand name. He refused to believe her and said he needed the American version because European medicine probably wasn't as safe. She very patiently explained that pharmaceutical standards in Europe are extremely strict. He eventually left without buying anything, saying he'd just wait until he got home. His headache must have been brutal for the rest of his trip. I was working at a coffee shop in Vienna when an American customer ordered a large coffee to go. I made him an espresso in a paper cup. He looked at it confused and said he ordered a large. I explained that this is a standard coffee size in Vienna. He said it was tiny and asked for a real large, like the size they have at Starbucks. I told him, we could make an Americano, which is espresso with hot water, in a bigger cup. He agreed, but seemed annoyed. When I handed it to him, he took a sip and made a face. He said it tasted watered down. I explained that's literally what an Americano is. Espresso with water added to make it larger and less intense. He said that defeated the whole point of coffee. I suggested he might prefer the espresso then. He said, no, it was too small. We went in circles like this for a few minutes before he just took the Americano and left, looking unsatisfied with the entire continent. My brother works at a car rental place in Dublin, and he told me about an American who was terrified of driving on the left side of the road. The customer asked if they had any American-style cars that drove on the right side. My brother had to explain that it's not about the car, it's about which side of the road you drive on, and in Ireland, everyone drives on the left. The customer asked if there were special lanes for tourists. My brother said no. Everyone follows the same rules. The customer then asked if he could just drive on the right side anyway, since that's what he was used to. My brother very seriously explained that would cause a head-on collision and was extremely illegal. The customer ended up canceling his rental and taking buses everywhere, probably for the best. I studied in Prague for a semester and worked at a tour company. An American tourist asked me why all the signs were in Czech and not English. I explained. The Czech is the official language of the Czech Republic. She said it was inconsiderate to tourists. I pointed out that there are usually English translations on major tourist signs. She said it still wasn't enough, and that if they wanted American tourists, they should make more effort. I asked if she'd ever been somewhere in America where signs were in languages other than English. She said yes, and she didn't like that either. At least she was consistent, I guess. I worked at a bookstore in Stockholm, and an American customer asked where our American history section was. I showed him our history section, which had a small shelf with some books about American history. He seemed disappointed and asked why it was so small. I explained that this is a Swedish bookstore, and most of our history section focuses on Swedish and European history. He said American history was world history and should have more space. I didn't really know how to respond to that. I showed him what we had, and he left saying European bookstores needed better selection. My friend worked at a swimming pool in Switzerland, and she told me about an American family who showed up in their street shoes. She had to explain that everyone must shower before entering the pool and that shoes aren't allowed on the pool deck. The father asked why they had so many rules. She explained it was for hygiene and safety. He said that in America, pools don't have that many restrictions. She politely said that different countries have different standards. Then the kids started, running on the wet tiles, and she had to tell them to walk. The mother said they were just having fun. My friend explained that people slip and get injured, which is why running isn't allowed. The family seemed to think the whole thing was overly strict, but they followed the rules. Later, my friend saw them leaving, and the father was telling his kids that European pools weren't as fun as American ones. I was working at a grocery store in Oslo when an American asked me why everything was so expensive. I explained that Norway has a high cost of living, but also high wages and good social services. He said a sandwich shouldn't cost $12. I converted it and told him it was actually about 120 kroner. He said that didn't help. I explained that things cost more in Norway, but people also earn more money, so it balances out. He said it didn't make sense to him. Then he asked why they didn't just lower prices. I tried explaining economics and purchasing power, but he just kept saying everything should cost the same as it does in America. He bought his expensive sandwich and left, shaking his head. My cousin worked at a train station in Brussels and told me about an American who missed his train because he didn't understand the platform system. In Europe, platforms are often announced only 15 or 20 minutes before departure. The customer complained that in America, gates are assigned earlier. My cousin explained that European train stations handle many more trains, and platforms can change, so they announce them closer to departure time. The guy said it was a dumb system and they should do it the American way. My cousin rebooked him on the next train and advised him to watch the departure boards. He missed that train too because he was getting coffee and didn't hear the announcement. Third time, my cousin personally walked him to the platform. I worked at a hotel in Athens, and an American guest called the front desk at 2 in the morning, angry that construction noise outside was keeping him awake. I explained that there was no construction happening at 2 a.m. He insisted he heard drilling. I went to check and realized it was cicadas, which are extremely loud in Greek summers. I explained this to him. He didn't believe me. He said insects don't make that much noise. I had to pull up a video on my phone of cicadas to prove it. He watched it, looking disturbed, and asked how people sleep with that noise. I told him, "You get used to it." He asked if we had rooms that were cicada-proof. I gave him earplugs. The next morning, he checked out early and said he couldn't handle the wildlife. A friend of mine worked at a tourist office in Venice, and an American asked her how to drive to the main attractions. She explained that Venice has no cars, only boats, and walking. He looked confused and asked how people got around. She said by walking or taking water buses. He asked where people parked their cars. She explained that there are parking garages on the mainland before you enter Venice, and then you walk or take a boat. He seemed genuinely baffled by this concept. He asked what people did in emergencies. She explained that ambulances are boats. He said that seemed inefficient. She pointed out that Venice was built on water over 1,000 years ago, long before cars existed. He said they should probably update the infrastructure. She just smiled and gave him a map of walking routes. I was working at a currency exchange in Berlin when an American tried to pay for his exchange with a $50 bill. I told him the fee for the exchange. He asked why there was a fee. I explained that currency exchange services charge fees. That's how they make money. He said his bank at home doesn't charge fees. I explained that his bank probably does charge fees. They're just built into the exchange rate. He didn't believe me. Then he asked if he could just use dollars everywhere in Berlin. I said no. Germany uses euros. He said dollars should be accepted everywhere because they're the world's reserve currency. I told him that doesn't mean stores have to accept them. He exchanged his money, but seemed annoyed about the whole concept of different currencies. My sister worked at a restaurant in Lisbon and told me about an American who sent back his steak 3 times. First time, he said it was too rare. The chef cooked it more. Second time, he said it was too tough. The chef made a new steak. Third time, he said it didn't taste right. The manager went to talk to him. Turns out he'd ordered a Portuguese-style steak, which is typically thinner and cooked differently than American steaks. The manager explained this. The customer said the menu should specify that it's not a normal steak. The manager pointed out that in Portugal, this is the normal steak. They ended up comping his meal just to end the situation. He left a review saying the restaurant didn't know how to cook steak properly. I worked at a gym in Copenhagen, and an American member asked me why we didn't have air conditioning. I explained that it was March and about 10 degrees Celsius outside. He said gyms should always have AC. I told him we have good ventilation and heating, and it's actually quite comfortable. He said he was used to working out in a cold environment. I offered to open some windows. He said that would let cold air in. I was confused because he just said he wanted it colder. He clarified that he wanted artificial cold air, not natural cold air. I didn't understand the difference, but I opened the windows anyway. He worked out for 20 minutes and then left, saying the gym wasn't up to his standards. My friend worked at a pharmacy in Rome, and an American tourist asked for some medicine without a prescription. She explained that in Italy, many medications require prescriptions. He said that in America, he could buy it over the counter. She said different countries have different regulations. He asked to speak to a manager. The manager came and explained the same thing. The tourist said this was ridiculous and that Italy should follow American standards. The manager very politely said that Italy follows European Union regulations. The tourist left, muttering about freedom. My friend said they get customers like that every week during tourist season. I was working at a museum in Amsterdam when an American visitor asked why all the paintings were so old. I explained it was an art museum focused on Dutch masters from the 17th century. He asked if they had any modern art. I directed him to a contemporary art museum across the city. He seemed disappointed and said he thought this museum would have all types of art. I explained that museums often specialize in specific periods or styles. He said, American museums show everything. I didn't argue, but I wondered if he'd actually been to many museums. He walked through the galleries for about 15 minutes and left. Later, I saw his review online saying the museum needed to update its collection. My brother worked at a train information desk in Paris, and an American asked him why the trains were always late. My brother checked the schedule and told him that, actually, the trains were running on time today. The customer insisted his train was late because it was supposed to leave at 14:30, and it was already 2:30. My brother realized the confusion and explained that 14:30 is 2:30 p.m. in 24-hour format. The customer seemed embarrassed, but then said that Europe should just use normal time. My brother explained that 24-hour time is actually less confusing because there's no AM or PM confusion. The customer said he'd never had confusion with AM and PM. My brother didn't mention that he literally just confused them 30 seconds ago. I worked at a clothing store in Madrid, and an American tourist asked me why all the sizes were wrong. I asked what she meant. She said she was normally a size 6, but nothing in that size fit her. I explained that European sizes are different from American sizes. She asked why we couldn't just use the same sizes everywhere. I told her that different regions have different sizing systems. She said it was frustrating and confusing. I helped her figure out her European size, and she found things that fit. She still seemed annoyed about the whole system, though. As she was leaving, she said someone should really standardize sizes internationally. I agreed that would be nice, but I didn't mention that the US is pretty much the only country not using standardized international sizing. A colleague of mine worked at a hotel in Brussels and told me about an American guest who complained that breakfast was too small. The hotel included a continental breakfast, which is typical in Europe: bread, cheese, ham, pastries, coffee. The guest said breakfast should include pancakes, bacon, eggs, and hash browns. My colleague explained that this was a European-style breakfast. The guest said he paid for breakfast and expected a real breakfast my colleague offered to recommend. Nearby restaurants that served American-style breakfasts. The guest said he shouldn't have to leave the hotel. My colleague couldn't really do anything about it. The guest left a 1-star review saying the hotel didn't provide adequate breakfast. The review mentioned that he'd stayed at hotels in 5 European countries, and none of them had proper breakfast. It never seemed to occur to him that maybe European breakfast is just different. I was working at a tourist information center in Vienna when an American asked me why everything closed so early. I asked what he meant. He said stores closed at 6 or 7 p.m. I explained that's normal in many European cities. He said stores in America stay open until 9 or 10 p.m. I told him that Europeans value work-life balance differently. He asked what people did if they needed to shop at night. I said they plan ahead or use 24-hour stores. Though those are less common, he said it seemed inconvenient. Explained that shop workers also deserve to have evenings with their families. He paused and said he'd never thought about it that way. Small moment of understanding, which was nice to see. My sister worked at a bank in Lisbon and told me about an American who was angry that the bank charged fees for international transactions. He said his American bank didn't charge fees. She pulled up the fee schedule from his bank's website and showed him that they actually did charge international fees, plus they gave him a worse exchange rate. He insisted that couldn't be right. She showed him the math. He calculated it on his phone and realized she was correct. He said American banks should be more transparent about fees. She agreed. Then he asked why. Portuguese banks charged fees too. She explained that all banks charge fees for currency, conversion, and international processing. He said it felt like everyone was trying to take his money. She pointed out that he was using a service, and services cost money. He accepted it, but didn't look happy. I used to work at an airport information desk in Frankfurt, and an American approached me, looking stressed. He asked when his flight to Munich was boarding, checked his ticket, and told him that his flight had already left 2 hours ago. He insisted that couldn't be right because his ticket said 1700 hours and it was only 5 p.m. I closed my eyes for a second and asked him if he understood 24-hour time. He said he did. I asked him what 1700 hours was. He said 5 p.m. Told him 5 p.m. is 1700 hours, which means his flight at 1700 hours already departed. He stared at me. Then he stared at his ticket. Then he asked why nobody told him that 5 p.m. and 1700 were the same time. I explained that they are the same time, and that's why I just told him. He missed his flight because he thought 1700 was a different time than 5 p.m. Despite knowing they were the same time, I helped him book a new flight. As he walked away, I heard him on the phone telling someone that European time was designed to confuse Americans. My friend worked at a chocolate shop in Brussels, and she told me about an American who bought a box of Belgian chocolates and then asked if they had any American chocolate. She asked why he wanted American chocolate when he was literally in Belgium, famous for having some of the best chocolate in the world. He said he just preferred American chocolate because it's what he grew up with. She said that was fair. Everyone has their preferences. He bought the Belgian chocolates for his family back home, but bought a Hershey bar from the convenience store next door for himself. She said she couldn't judge. People like what they like. I think the funniest part about all these stories is that most of these situations could be avoided with just a tiny bit of research or an open mind. Nobody expects tourists to know everything about every country they visit. But maybe, just maybe, when you're in a different country and things work differently than you're used to, the answer isn't that they're doing it wrong. The answer is that they're doing it their way, and you're the visitor. Every country has its own systems, customs, and ways of doing things. That's what makes travel interesting. If everywhere was exactly like home, what would be the point of leaving? And these stories never stop coming. I'm in the field collecting them year-round, turning tourist season chaos into cultural psychology lessons. Most people see funny anecdotes. Subscribers see patterns about ethnocentrism, cognitive biases, and why travel either expands minds or reinforces them. I publish this kind of analysis weekly. But here's the thing. YouTube only consistently shows it to subscribers. If you've watched this far, you already know this isn't throwaway content. Make sure you actually see the next one.